Now a report on the status of Muslim civil rights. The Council on American-Islamic Relations yesterday released its 6th annual report looking at anti-Muslim violence and discrimination in the United States. We'll hear from the group's executive director and author of the report. His comments are just under 40 minutes.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the Compassionate, the Merciful. Assalamu alaikum. Peace to you. Thanks for coming today. We hope to have a quick and easy format for you so you're able to answer all your questions about our report. My name is Ibrahim Hooper. I'm National Communications Director for the Council on American-Islamic Relations. Format of today's news conference. First, we'll have a few words from CAIR Executive Director Nihad Awad. Then we'll have a short rundown of how a case is handled by CAIR by Joshua Salaam from our Civil Rights Department, and then we'll have the analysis of the report itself from Dr. Mohamed Nimer. And following that, we'll have opportunity for you to ask any questions you may have about the report. So first of all, Nihad Awad, CAIR Executive Director.
Thank you, Ibrahim, and thanks for coming. The Civil Rights Report, it is an annual report that CAIR, the Council on American-Islamic Relations, issues after April. We decided to issue this report in April, but it gets out of print around June or July. And the reason we started to choose this date in April is in the aftermath of the Oklahoma City bombing, when Muslims were unjustly accused of the bombing, CAIR documented more than 200 incidents of anti-Muslim hysteria and discrimination. After that, we decided to have an annual report that documents the experience that Muslims go through. But just to give you a background about this report and this organization, the outer picture of this is the fact that there are 7 million Muslims in this country. That makes Muslims the second largest religious group in the country after Christians. And Muslims come from every walk of life. They live in the suburbs, they live in the cities. Your physician could be a Muslim, your neighbor, your co-worker, or even your cab driver. Therefore, Muslims are present in the society, and sometimes they encounter misunderstanding. And that's why the role of this organization is very critical in giving information out about Muslims and Islam in this country to prevent acts of discrimination from happening. Our approach to the civil rights matters here is education. And to do that, we're trying to help educators and employers understand the Islamic religious practices, knowing that Islam is not known to many people, and misunderstanding and ignorance is our biggest challenge in this country. And that's why we try to educate and share information with employers. And we produced this, for example, booklet. It's called an Employer Guide to Islamic Religious Practices. It is designed to inform employers about the rights and the religious practices of their Muslim employees. This has been greatly appreciated and very useful by employers around the country. It increases productivity, it builds loyalty, and it accommodates diversity and change. We also came up with another guide. It's called an Educator's Guide to Islamic Religious Practices. And again, it is designed to give information to educators and to classmates to help understand that the Islamic practices, although it is not known to many people, it ought to be understood. Now, the Muslim practices, whether the prayer, the scarf, or fasting of the month of Ramadan, or many of the Muslim habits, are seen in the workplace. Maybe in other faith community people, may not practice their religion in the workplace because that religion maybe does not require them to express their faith except maybe outside the work or maybe in the weekends. But for Muslims, they're obligated to offer 5 prayers a day. At least 2 of these prayers fall in the 8 to 5 scheduled time. So they have to offer their prayers. Now we remind people that these rights are protected by law. And we believe that the misunderstanding is on the decline the more Muslims become active and known. Even Muslim patients sometimes suffer from discrimination and mistreatment by the healthcare providers because of ignorance, not because of hostility. And that's why we came up with another guide. It's called A Healthcare Provider's Guide to Islamic Religious Practices. So as you can see, these guides are designed to inform people about Muslims to prevent discrimination from happening. To educate Muslims about their own rights, we came up with a small pocket guide. It is almost a small encyclopedia on civil rights. It is designed to help people know what should they do step by step if they're subject to discrimination or mistreatment. Now, the civil rights aspect is a main component of our organization.
Don't forget the mosque report.
Yes, I will. It is a main component of our organization. Our organization is a national advocacy and information agency, but because of the civil rights issues are a critical challenge to Muslims, it has become one of our primary focus because CAIR is the only national organization that caters to the civil rights of Muslims. We compile these incidents, we research them, we deal with them on one-to-one basis. I was reminded to remind you that a few months ago, we came up with the largest study on Muslims in America, a mosque in America, a national portrait. This was in conjunction with Hartford Seminary. I believe this booklet or book is important to media, to professionals, to researchers, or to average people to understand who the Muslims are, what the mosque's role in the Muslim life in America. And it has put a human face on Muslims in this country. Now we speak with figures and with facts, with research to document the experience of Muslims in this country. I would like to congratulate our researchers and the civil rights staff who have worked very hard to come up with this information. These are real cases that we encounter on a daily basis. And here I would like to introduce to you Joshua Salaam, our civil rights coordinator, who has dealt with almost every single case that is reported in this report today. And Brother Joshua will just brief you on how he handles the cases, what kind of cases we get, and after that, our researcher, Dr. Mohamed Nimer, to give you an analysis of the report. Joshua.
Hello. Again, my name is Joshua Salaam, and I'm a civil rights coordinator. I work in the civil rights department here at CAIR. And I'm just going to give you a general overview of the cases that we intake and how they come and how we deal with them. First, the cases come through many ways, via phone, fax, email, and even on the internet. We have 9 chapters across the United States, in different states, California, New York, Michigan, but any other state, all the cases come through this office. So we have a large amount of cases that we have to deal with daily. The cases that come in are of different types. We get some cases that are clear-cut discrimination, and some are not so clear. Sometimes it's actions versus statements, meaning someone will clearly say that you cannot do that religious practice here in this workplace. And it's clear discrimination, and it's easy to document and deal with. Other times, a Muslim is faced with discrimination, and they believe it's because of their religion. They look at other people in the office, and they see that they're being terminated, or they're being given more work, or they're forced to work later. They're being spoken to very rude, in a rude manner, and they have no other reason that this is happening other than they believe they're different because of their religious belief. Now, those are a little bit more difficult to investigate and to handle. The reasons why these cases come in are, I'm going to back up with Mr. Nihad said, about sometimes it's just clear misunderstandings about the Muslims and the Islamic religion. People misunderstand of who we are, why we practice, why we pray, why the women wear the headscarf, why the men grow their beards, all of this, why we go to Friday prayer, and have a misunderstanding about Islam and the religious practices of Muslims. Other reasons why Muslims are being discriminated against is outdated policies. Policies that are not compliant with Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And to give an example, it may be a police station or bus drivers that are saying, we have a policy here that says no headgear. And this, we're just sticking to our policy. We have a policy that says no facial hair, and that's our policy. But the manager or the director of that organization doesn't know that they have to make exceptions for religious practices, reasonable exceptions. And those are the reasons that some Muslims are being discriminated against, other than, you know, maybe a person saw a movie and they think they understand Islam, or they read a book, and so they're telling the Muslim. We've even had people telling Muslims what they can or cannot do. The employer telling the employee as if they were their religious leader. So that's in general of how the case comes in, how we investigate it, send out a letter stating the allegations and asking the company to investigate it, and asking for reasonable accommodation for that Muslim individual. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Joshua. My name is Mohamed, Nimer. My job here is to just discuss the report and just give some perspective on the overall situation, the status of Muslim civil rights in the United States. As you can see from the figures, the complaints that are reported to CAIR are on the rise. The right way to put those numbers in perspective is to consider the following example. Suppose a group of congressmen introduced legislation in Congress saying, well, this is a secular country, there is no, we shouldn't entangle religion with faith, so we shouldn't have a federal day off on Christmas. And then a Christian called an advocacy group and complained that their child is not able to observe a Christmas holiday. Now, this is the kind of thing that Muslims go through every year, and this is only one aspect of the religion. Now, this example doesn't mean that there is only one Christian who feels strongly about the issue. This is a systemic issue that impacts all the Christian population. The same way, when you got few Muslims complaining that their children cannot observe holidays, Muslim holidays, unpenalized for it, then you have to understand that this is not just one singular case there or of one Muslim family that cares about observing Eid. So there is so much that we can take and document. You don't have to go do a survey to figure out that all Muslims in that public school district are impacted by this policy. In certain areas, for example, in New Jersey, in Detroit, Eid is a public holiday because there's a great number of Muslim students in those districts. Now that is not the case in many other districts, most districts. This just gives you an example of how to see those numbers. Let me just move on. The main areas of complaint consistently has been the workplace and public schools, accounting for about 2/3 of all complaints that CAIR has received, although the incidents unfortunately happen in many other aspects of life. In the prison system, Muslim converts complain about lack of religious accommodation. They don't have chaplains to cater to their needs. Sometimes they're not allowed to do Friday prayers. Sometimes a Muslim convert in prison is asked to certify that he's Muslim or she's Muslim. In government agencies, typically a Muslim woman goes to renew her driver license and told that you have to take off the headscarf so we can take the photo. Otherwise, you can't have a driver license. The State Department, for people renewing their passports, they face the same thing. A person renewing a passport after having adopted a Muslim name go through a hassle before they receive their passport. Same thing with the police. Even police officers have been told you cannot wear beards because it's against the uniform policy in the various police departments. Now, the types of incidents you can see. Denial of employment, job termination, but you can accounting for about 20% the workplace here. But issues denying religious accommodation, things that do not require any financial cost or any administrative cost on the part of employers, sometimes still get to be denied for Muslims when they don't imply any economic cost to corporations. Sometimes Muslims with certain dress that is not approved by store owners sometimes, or gas station owners, don't even allow Muslim customers to come in. This has consistently happened. Let me talk about Muslim features triggering discriminations. It's unfortunate that a pattern has settled down now. A great number of cases, hijab or beard, about a third, even cases of ethnic origin. Many of these cases are based on the complexion of the person who is mistreated, or a known national origin of that person. Prayer, prayer is a pillar of the Islamic faith, and Muslim students and Muslim employees, they still struggle with those issues. Now, education has and will continue to be an important part of how Muslims deal with the issue. Yet, after 6 years of this education approach, we have reached a limit to how much it can alter the situation. You see, Muslims want to have this situation reversed once and for all. They don't want to keep dealing with a case of this Muslim here and that Muslim here, still struggling to attain their basic rights that a lot of Americans take for granted. What we have seen is, despite the fact that a lot of cases when the Civil Rights Department challenges corporations, and then the media gets on the case and adding some public pressure on that corporation that is denying a Muslim the right to prayer, the right to a beard or a headscarf, they back down, they settle. But to have them reverse their own personnel policies to prevent those things from happening has proved to be a major task. So they would rather deal with the embarrassment resulting from denying a basic human constitutional rights to a Muslim, rather than institutionalized procedures and rules within their own corporation or within the public school system, public school district in any place, to prevent those things from happening in the first place. That is the objective of CAIR, and that is what the American Muslim community wants to see. Now, there are laws protecting the rights of people to observe their faith. There are laws protecting the right of people being discriminated against because they happen to be African American or Arab or Indian or Pakistani or Iranian. But those laws are not self-enforcing. Quite often, the people who are most vulnerable to those incidents are people who lack the means to sue their cases, or to the people who mistreat them, or even to challenge them. And I want to point out three classes of Muslims: women, children who go to public schools, and workers, laborers, especially assembly line workers, workers who live on daily wages. In many ways, I venture to say these three classes of Muslims are second-class citizens in this country. We have been trying to educate. In some cases, you get a settlement in a company about a case, and then 3 months down the line, the same type of incident happens with the same company, the same location, sometimes even under the same management. Now that tells you that there's something serious going on here, and that is that they do not take those situations seriously. They'd rather deal with them on a case-by-case basis, trying to just brush them aside. Okay, let's just get this out of the way and just get on with it, rather than recognizing that, well, you have a population group that is impacted by the situation, and there is a need, and their contribution to the workforce is increasing, and they are taxpayers as well, and a lot of those corporations, they receive government grants to do their economic production and distribution in many places. And so they live on tax money that partly contributed by American Muslims. Yet they still don't have, they have not gotten to a situation where they recognize that they need to deal with the issue institutionally. Now, where does that leave us? It has left Muslims thinking that, well, maybe the legislature should step in. And the good news is last year, 3 states, Illinois, Minnesota, and New Jersey, have passed laws to protect halal food. Muslims prepare food according to certain requirements in terms of meat slaughter and preparation, and there are certain food items like alcohol and pork that Muslims do not consume. So these states passed laws to protect the labeling of food products that are halal, that meet the requirements of halal. That's good news. Yet in other areas, the situation has proved to be more difficult. There's one issue that American Muslims should also share the blame, so to speak, about, and that is the lack of participation in local politics, school boards. This process has yet to start. And that's probably the reason why Muslims aren't mad or don't exhibit an outrage when dealing with these situations. We recognize that we have to do more in terms of getting more and more people participating in the school system, in terms of getting more and more people participating in the legislative process at the state level. One last thing I want to also to end it in a good note. In 1999, the Supreme Court has decided to deny an appeal by the Newark Police Department, a lower court decision to ask the police department to allow Muslim police officers to grow their beards for religious reasons. The police department there continued the legal struggle, the legal fight. Eventually, the Supreme Court in 1999 decided not to even consider the case. That was a great success that goes a long way in terms of ascertaining that Muslims do have rights as everybody else. Yet, the drawback is, still, you have other police departments who have not gotten the message. They still deny their Muslim police officers in other places the right to wear beards. So, in conclusion, I should say that the fight still goes on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nimer. If anyone has a question about the report, we'd be glad to address it to any one of the panelists. Any questions?
In recent months, there have been several actions by the administration, such as the ejection of Abdullah Al-Aryan, the cancellation of the meeting with Muslim leaders by Vice President Cheney, that have raised concern in the Islamic community. How confident are you that the administration is committed to addressing some of the issues that you raised today in the report?
Well, I think we've always found that the law is on our side on these issues. As Dr. Nimer was mentioning, there are laws that support the right to religious accommodation. There are laws that support the right to religious freedom in the schools, all of these things. It tends to not be a systemic issue. It tends to be individual prejudices being carried out in the workplace, in schools, or just lack of information about Islam. So as far as the administration goes, I might defer to our executive director to speak on that issue, but in terms of many of the cases we deal with, it's a matter of a lack of education, a lack of understanding of Islam and what Muslims are all about. Did you want to say something about it?
Yeah, just quickly. I think the lack of inclusion of American Muslims in decision-making circles is a major challenge that we're facing, and we believe that it is because of Islamophobia, which is the product of anti-Muslim propaganda. There are some political organizations that are working very hard to prevent Muslims from being heard, from being seen as an active participants in the political process. And it has a negative effect on our community because it sends the wrong message that you're not equal to others, even if you are taxpayers, even if you are voters, even if you are full citizens, whether born here or migrated to this country. We believe that this process of exclusion was effective in the 40s, in the 50s, in the 60s, and should not be allowed to happen or to continue to happen these days. Unfortunately, the administration has not done enough to acknowledge this problem and to reach out to the Muslim community, although this particular administration won a major support by Muslim voters during the election campaigns, but due to mainly pro-Israel organizations' pressures in Washington, D.C. They have been pressuring the administration from not communicating with the Muslim community. The challenge that we have put forward to the administration is to prove to us that on the foreign policy issues, the United States should prove itself that it is in charge, that not special interest groups are directing and giving signals to the administration whom they should deal with and whom they should not. We believe it is dangerous, it is wrong that this administration or any other administration to allow special interest groups to lobby them at the expense of our interest. And it is also dangerous to look at the American Muslim community from a foreign policy window. This is our home. We are 7 million. We are the second largest faith community in this country. We ought to be recognized not only in words, but in action. So in brief, I would say the incidents, the string of incidents that happened with the administration is a dangerous indication that our administration is not strong enough to be inclusive and to respect the presence of Muslims. If they show that respect to our community, that would reflect good and better and our administration's image in the world, and mainly here, that our report is accommodating diversity. Unfortunately, the Muslim community is until now not included as a diverse group, in the society.
Yeah. Question?
Report and the speakers say a lot of reasons for rising this incidents. But my question is, does the Muslim community have any mistakes about that? And the other question is, what is the main reason of rising these incidents related to Muslims? And secondly, why does not happen any incidents related to Jews? Is there any discrimination on that or double standard on that?
If I understand the question correctly, it's do American Muslims have a role in what is happening in their community and the experiences they face and these kinds of things? I mean, of course, it's on us to be good citizens, to be productive members of the society, to project a good image of Islam, to act out Islam in our daily lives so that people see us and respect us as people of faith and people of high moral standards. So that's on us. It's also on us to educate people about Islam. As we said, much of what we talk about here today results from ignorance and misunderstanding. So it's really our job to create understanding and to give accurate information about Islam, because nobody else is going to do it. We're going to have to do it. So that we do have a role in fighting this kind of discrimination, not just in terms of challenging the discrimination itself, but cutting it off at its roots by giving an accurate portrayal of Islam.
The other part of that,
What was the other part?
Why does not happen any incident related to Jews?
Well, as far as I know, there are anti-Semitic incidents that happen around the country each year, and I believe Jewish organizations issue reports on these kinds of things.
Jews got all civil rights around the country, not just...
Well, Muslims have all the civil rights too. Again, it's, as Dr. Nimer said, you need to enforce civil rights and you need to be active participants in the society to make sure that your civil rights are accommodated.
So you said there's no discrimination or double standard on that issue between Muslims and Jews, right?
No, we're dealing here with the Muslim community, and we limit it to that. Any other questions? All right.
I believe, Mr. Salaam, you mentioned movies as a sort of being a contributing factor. Obviously, there's no shortage of projections in the entertainment media that tend to demonize Muslims as threatening or represent them as terrorists. How important do you think addressing that aspect of this problem is?
I mean, we found through experience that demonization of Muslims in the entertainment industry particularly is one of the key sources for this ignorance and stereotyping of Muslims. I mean, we've challenged innumerable films from True Lies, Executive Decision, The Siege, all of these kinds of movies that give a negative portrayal of Muslims and an inaccurate portrayal of Muslims. That's what we want. We don't want to say, well, you have to hold Muslims up and put them on a pedestal as being somehow better than other people. All we ask is that you show the reality of the Muslim experience, in that 99.999% of all Muslims will live and die without ever coming close to an act of violence or political instability. And that's the reality, not the minuscule things that happen around the world that are often attributed to Islam. And we want to put Islam in context for people. When the IRA sets off a bomb in Northern Ireland, and somebody would come to you and say, well, that's Catholicism. You'd say, well, that's ridiculous. We know what Catholicism is. That has nothing to do with it. But if Muslims do something that is seen as bad or wrong, and if somebody comes to you and say, well, that's Islam, you might go, well, maybe it is, because you don't have the context in which to place these kinds of incidents. But as the Muslim community grows, and your child's doctor is a Muslim, your bus driver is a Muslim, the checkout person at Walmart's a Muslim, these kinds of barriers break down because you can put the Muslim community in context.
Often the people most vulnerable, such as women and day laborers, don't have the resources to fight harassment. Does your organization file legal action against employers on their behalf? And are there any particular cases currently?
Well, first I'd like to clarify his statement. He was just saying that those are the three who are more discriminated against. And as far as resources, I'll let the executive director talk on that, but his statement was just that not that those three don't have the resources, but that those three, especially the women with the headscarf, you can see that from 3 blocks away, that there's a person over there. Some of the men, you walk down the street and you may not know they're Muslim until they get closer or till you see them face to face and things like that. So those 3 were more discriminated against than others. But
also, it has a lot to do with, as anyone in the society, economic resources. We have a diverse community. Some have substantial economic resources, others don't. So it follows the same pattern in the rest of the society. You need resources to be able to do legal challenges. And very often we're able to resolve cases without going to a legal challenge, and that's what we prefer. Okay, any other questions? If not, we'll be available for one-on-one interviews afterwards if anybody wishes. And again, thank you for coming.
The report is available.
And the report is available, downloadable from our internet site, www.cair-net.org/civil rights. So cair-net.org/civil rights. Thank you.